Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We are going to start momentarily. We are waiting for the Honorable Erin O'Toole to join us, and we've got notice that he's be joining us momentarily. And there we have him. The Honorable Erin O'Toole is bang on time, and we will start. So, welcome. Good evening, sir, and good to have you with us. So we're live on Facebook and on Zoom. Today, we are honored and privileged to have the Honorable Erin O'Toole, leader of the official opposition of Canada and the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, in our midst. I would be moderating the session today. Moving on. My name is Vijay Thomas. I am the president of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. And in my day job, I run a software company, and I have been the member of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years now. And I think today is a big moment for us at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. We have with us a leader that could potentially become the Prime Minister of Canada. And I'd like all of you, if you have some questions, today is the day. Today is the time for you to send in those questions, and I'll do my best to get them across to the Honorable Erin O'Toole. With me today is Virender Rathi. Virender Rathi is our Vice President and Director of Legal Affairs and Government Relations. Virender is the President of the Accent Lawyers LLP. He graduated from Osgood Hall Law School. He's a member of the Law Society of Ontario, Canadian Bar Association, Ontario Bar Association in Castle. And he has been a member of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years now. And Virenderji will be helping me with today's event. Moving on. Everyone. Yeah. Virenderji, if you want to say something, please.
I just say hello, everyone.
Thank you, Virender. And today's program, I just wanted to mention a little bit, those of you joining for the first time, we've started the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, the ICCC Thursday Talks and Leaders Talks every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. So just log in here. We'll have somebody interesting or an interesting topic to talk about. And the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce is a non-partisan business organization. We've been in existence for 44 years. I am the 32nd president of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. So there's a lot of history, a lot of tradition. And today, we definitely think, it's one of our big moments to have the Honorable Erin O'Toole. So moving on, there's a big event that's also coming up that I will take, half a minute to explain. The Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, we're coming up with Connect 2021, which is 10 days, 10 states. And Mr. O'Toole, I will be pitching along to today's interview for why you should also join us to go to India. We'll be visiting 10 states in 10 days, virtually from Canada. And we've got, Invest India, all levels of government in India and in Canada participating. So the big one for us, I will have some more details about it at the end of the show. So how all of you in the audience can also participate. Before that, as I have our Vice President Legal, we got to read up a little bit of a legal disclaimer here. These events are conducted for general information purposes, does not constitute legal or professional advice. There's a bunch of stuff there that you can read yourselves. At the bottom, the views expressed by speakers are their own personal opinion, do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the ICCC. So with that out of the way, we've come to our star for the evening. The Honorable Erin O'Toole is the leader of the official opposition Canada, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's led a life of service. He enrolled in the Royal Canadian Air Force when he was 18. After 12 years of service, Erin spent the next decade working as a corporate lawyer. He was elected to represent Durham 3 times, first in the 2020 by-election, then in 2015 and in 2019. He served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade before becoming Minister of Veteran Affairs at the end of the Harper government. He served as a Conservative Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs for 2 years. He's married to Rebecca, and they have 2 children, Molly and Jack. With that, I'd like to hand it over to the Honorable Erin O'Toole. Sir, we'd like to start with you giving us a little update about your view of the Canadian policy, your view of the future, your view of what you will be doing. A quick maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we will get to question and answers. But we need to kind of hear your preamble to what you're going to be doing and what you think is happening. And obviously, you do this every day, so we'd like to hear from you. Thank you, sir, and over to you. Mr. O'Toole, I think you're on mute.
There you go. Now you've unmuted me. Thank you. Thank you, Vijay, for having me. And I appreciate all the work ICCC is doing, particularly in COVID. You've pivoted. These sessions each Thursday are a great way for your members to stay in touch. And we're worried about the future. We've been disappointed to see Canada falling behind many other countries in the vaccine rollout and in getting past COVID. And I firmly believe that for us to secure a strong future for Canada and for India, we need to do that by unleashing the full potential of what our 2 countries can build together. As you know, Vijay, we are both free market democracies. We're separated by oceans, but bound by incredible ties of family and history. Those connections, that shared history, may be what makes us Commonwealth cousins, but our fierce commitment to a democratic and a prosperous future should make us deeper partners. Last month, I introduced Canada's recovery plan, a plan from the Conservative Party that will secure the future for all Canadians. A Conservative government would enact a comprehensive job plan to recover the 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic within 1 year. Our plan will take immediate action in some of the hardest hit sectors, including many of your members' sectors, and rebuild Main Street. Second, we'll enact the toughest accountability and transparency laws in Canadian history. Canadians are losing faith in our institutions, from the Prime Minister's office, who is having his 3rd personal ethics investigation, to the leadership of the Canadian Armed Forces. We need to restore confidence in those institutions. Third, this last year has deepened the mental health crisis our communities and families have been struggling with across Canada. Canada's Conservatives will introduce a Canada Mental Health Action Plan and will boost funding partnerships with the provinces and community groups for mental wellness and programming. Fourth, we will ensure our country is never unprepared for a crisis again. We will ensure that we have domestic capacity in key areas. And fifth, our final pillar, a Conservative government will secure Canada's economy by getting the budget back to balance over the next decade. I say consistently, spending to protect Canadians during the pandemic is the right thing to do. And Conservatives, as the official opposition, we have supported that. But I think we all know, Vijay, we cannot pass unsustainable debt to our children and to future generations. As Canadians are vaccinated and the economy begins to reopen, we will wind down emergency support programs responsibly. And as we recover from COVID-19, it's time to get the economy moving. It's time to recover lost ground. It's time to repair relationships. And it's time for certainty and competent leadership. It's time for ethical leadership in Ottawa again. Canada's Conservatives got our country out of the last recession, and I know we can lead Canada out of this one too. We will overcome the adversity of COVID-19, and Canada can be a leader again. And as part of that, Vijay, we have to kickstart the relationship between Canada and India. India is Canada's 10th largest trading partner, but it has the potential to be one of our largest, second or third. India's economic transformation is astounding and well underway. And it's one that should not only be applauded, but partnered with and supported. Extensive Canadian experience in engineering, in design, and infrastructure should be harnessed to help India meet substantial urban and transportation infrastructure needs. And we could, of course, increase our food products, fertilizers, and exports to support India's food security goals by leveraging the innovation of Canadian farmers, food processors to establish a world-class agricultural partnership. With the Indo-Pacific as the center of gravity for global growth over the next generation, there are so many mutually beneficial opportunities for our two countries to better enable businesses to develop new markets, find new investment opportunities, create innovation and jobs for both Canadians and Indians. Canadians should also be at the table for the Quad agreement. I've been talking about this for many, many months. We need to be working more with our allies in the Indo-Pacific towards security by participating in some of the Quad meetings and exercises with India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. Expanding and deepening Canada's relationship with democratic countries in the Indo-Pacific is a critical way we can reduce our economic dependence on communist China. The Republic of India is a great democracy and an emerging global power. Now is the time to find ways to partner for the betterment of our citizens in both countries and the entire world. There's much to do, and I'm committed to doing it virtually and hopefully in person with the ICCC and with the Indo-Canadian community from coast to coast to coast. So thank you, Vijay, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Erin. That was fantastic. I think I sometimes get I'm a little worried when I give an open mic to a politician and I didn't have to step in. So you were right on time and you got that. I think you got all the key messages done with and fantastic. So with that out of the way, I think we'll dive right in. We've got a bunch of questions. I must tell you, there is a lot of interest in what the Conservative Party has to say, what Erin O'Toole has to say, and I think the Indo-Canadian. I've sometimes wondered how are Indo-Canadians, so politically savvy, and then I realized we come from the largest democracy in the world. So isn't it obvious that they know how democracy works? So I think there's a lot of questions. I think that's probably something that we will see come up today. So I think the first question is something that you touched upon already. Indo-Canadians, there's almost 1.6 million Indo-Canadians, which I try to round up to 2 million, which as from a density of population is higher than the number of Indo-Canadians in the US, which is 10 times bigger. So having that many Indo-Canadians, we definitely, as a percentage of population, our relationship with India is not at the same level as the relationship that probably the US has with India. And this is not just a statement for the present, right now. I think it's also been something that probably has been, hot and cold. We've had some ups and downs, but it's never really hit the whole potential that you touched upon. Why aren't we the second largest trading partner? Why is India the second largest trading partner? So what do you think the fundamental issues are, and how would Erin O'Toole government change that?
Well, thanks, Vijay. The fundamental issue on why Canada's not living up to that potential you just outlined is a failure of leadership on the part of Mr. Trudeau. And I say that I'm the opposition leader, but I say that very disappointed because, as you said, I was parliamentary secretary for trade, international trade for a time under Prime Minister Harper. In the Conservative government, I sat in cabinet at the end. As you know, we were starting to really hit tremendous potential with India in terms of bilateral trade and investment. In fact, every year we saw double-digit gains. I'm quite sure it was every year in the trade relationship. And of course, not just people-to-people trade, but business investment, vice versa, foreign direct investment by large Indian companies in Canada and vice versa. The relationship was going very well. It was a relationship of respect, of peers, of friends. And how did we build that under the decade the Conservatives were in? We leveraged the remarkable potential of those people-to-people ties. As you said, the 1.6, or I like rounding it up to 2 million Indo-Canadian strong, particularly as a GTA MP myself, I see the remarkable input of Indo-Canadians in terms of entrepreneurship, investment, creativity, employment. And that's the same in all major parts of our country, and particularly in places like Alberta, the lower mainland of British Columbia, the interior of British Columbia for that matter, Atlantic Canada, Montreal. So we need to leverage, because each of those potential ties, that's part of our historic bind, is those people-to-people ties. When used effectively, they benefit Canadian businesses, families, and there's mutual benefit for Indian families and businesses as well. When the relationship is taken for granted, as Mr. Trudeau has, where we all remember his unfortunate state dinner, where or a state visit, he turned that visit into a visit about himself and a few small people's advisors around him, as opposed to leveraging the potential of trade, of investment, of cooperation on security, on diplomacy, on developmental aid, addressing some of the global challenges on a trade and transshipment by Chinese companies, these sorts of things. So we will restore that relationship and really harness the tremendous potential that is right here in Canada. And to do that, Vijay, we will need to do more and more work with the ICCC.
Thank you. For starters, we'd like to have you on our 10 days, 10 states mission to India. Absolutely, we'll send you more details, but I think we'd like to see if we can get you on board. So that's, I think, the India-Canada thing. So one is, I think, the trade aspects of it. And I think we have some follow-up questions, but we'll try to hit some of the other big issues, and then we'll get to that. There is a big issue, a little bit of a elephant in the room kind of thing. Most Indo-Canadians are immigrants. So there is a perception that the Conservative Party is possibly, anti-immigration, or not as immigration friendly as the Liberal Party, and which is, again, what would you be if somebody said a statement like that, what would Erin O'Toole, as the leader of the Conservative Party, have to say about something like that?
Well, I'm glad you raised that, Vijay, because I'm growing the Conservative Party to include more and more Canadians in our movement. In my victory speech, in my last speech at the convention, I've said, whether you've been in Canada 3 months or 3 generations, regardless of your religious, cultural background, whether you're Indigenous Canadian or a new arrival, if you share our commitment to hard work, free enterprise, support for strong communities, strong families, a principled approach on the world stage, we need your help, because Canada needs your help right now. And here is the reality of it. We hear the Liberals try to mislead people all the time. There are only 2 prime ministers that dramatically increased immigration throughout a global recession. Their names were Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper. In fact, we had record numbers of immigration, high public confidence. We were bringing wait times down for family reunification, not through lotteries and promises that are never met by the Trudeau government, but by steady commitment with great leadership, including leadership by Jason Kenney when he was the minister, as you know, modernizing, expanding, growing. We will do that again, because we need to fix the family reunification backlog that was already there before COVID. And now it's incredibly unfair and it's dividing families. And we need to heal that immediately. We need to speed up credential recognition and make sure that we benefit from a growing and important source of immigration, which is the Indo-Pacific. I talk about this all the time. And Canada, particularly with our position through Vancouver and British Columbia, we're an important Pacific player, and we need to partner. And we also need to make sure that there's increasing pools of immigration, bringing some of these talent investment opportunity alongside reuniting families. So this will be an area of priority for me, Vijay. And we're going to call out some of the, quite frankly, misleading liberal rhetoric on this, because as I said, if you look at who increased steadily, even when the global recessions were gripping, it was conservative governments. And a conservative government led by me will make sure we fix some of the backlogs for family reunification, which is hurting families from coast to coast.
Thank you very much, Erin. I think that answers. There were a lot of follow-up questions around that, but I think you've hit on a bunch of points in there. So fantastic. I think that probably will allay a lot of fears that people in the audience might have on this issue. So conservatives are as friendly or friendlier, and you got statistics of two other prime ministers that probably statistically were friendlier in even a downtime. So thank you very much, Erin O'Toole, for that. We have probably many more questions, but we'll move to a slightly different topic here, which is maybe not to do with Indo-Canadians as such, but just conservatives versus liberals. There is a saying that as the economy does well, everything goes well, everybody turns conservative. As things start going downhill, right? As COVID hits, people turn liberal, and this is philosophical because people basically say, you know what? I need the government to step in. I need people to pay me some base income. So what is your take on that? And today I think the boat has sailed for things like CERB, CEBA, people even talking about guaranteed basic income. So on all these issues, where does the Conservative Party of Canada stand? I mean, we probably know the old Conservative Party of Canada on where they stood on some of these issues. Where does the new Conservative Party of Canada, under the leadership of Mr. Erin O'Toole, stand on this? And what would we look at Erin O'Toole government on some of these issues going forward?
Thanks, Vijay. That's an important question. We need, as I said, to secure Canada's future post-COVID-19. And Canadians know it was a conservative government that got Canada out of the last global recession faster than any other country in the G7, and we kept taxes low. We will get Canada out of this situation. And let's review where we're at. In 2015, when Mr. Trudeau won, he inherited a balanced budget, the only one in the G7. He inherited an economy that was getting investment and job creation, including investments from around the world, including double-digit growth with India, for example. And he inherited an environment where businesses were looking to expand in Canada because we have a highly skilled workforce. We're an open, diverse, welcoming society. Everything was rosy. And in 16, 17, the American economy was recovering. So he literally inherited a time where our biggest trading partner was doing well. And what did Mr. Trudeau do with that opportunity? Before COVID, Vijay, he was running $30 billion deficits. So he accumulated $100 billion worth of debt, roughly, before COVID-19 hit, in good economic times. $160 billion of capital left Canada before COVID. Before COVID, there were illegal rail blockades, shutting down factories and plants in Ontario because there was no rule of law. That led Warren Buffett to pull billions out of Canada because we couldn't even run the trains on time before COVID. So what do we have to do? We have to fix this situation because now, within COVID, Mr. Trudeau put another $400 billion of debt. So there's $500 billion of debt accumulated by Mr. Trudeau in just 5 years. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the G7 or G20. And there's a sense that nothing can get done in Canada. Why would you invest here when Mr. Trudeau is trying to scare away investment, trying to tax the 1%, trying to be anti-corporate, anti-energy, anti-softwood? We have to reverse that because I want to hand my children a united, prosperous country where they can live and fulfill their dreams. And what I love about the cultural communities I get to meet with, including many Indo-Canadians, I was in a boardroom a year or so ago in Brampton, where someone within one generation of coming to Canada was employing hundreds of other people, came here with very little, and now there's hundreds literally of families relying on his investments, his entrepreneurship. That is the remarkable potential of Canada. We don't need to tax everyone. We don't need to make the CERB a permanent thing, suggesting that work is somehow not a noble pursuit. I'll tell you, in the GTA, in the lower mainland of BC, across the country, there are people that come here for the opportunity of Canada, and then they're giving back through their church, through their temples, through their gurdwara, through their university, through sending their kids and helping programs and expanding their hospitals. That's the Canada we need to restore. We need to restore Canadian optimism, Canadian leadership. We're not going to be doing that by mortgaging away our children's future and reimagining the economy. So Conservatives got us out of the last recession, not with magic, not with spending hundreds of billions of dollars we don't have, but by making sure Canada is the best place to invest, drawing in talent from around the world and helping families and communities raise strong communities and build this great country. That's how I was raised, with middle-class values to work hard and help your neighbor. That's what will grow us out of this recession.
Thank you very much, Erin, and I think that's to a lot of business owners, we obviously are caught in a situation where damned if you do, damned if you don't. But at the same time, I think some of the principles that you mentioned in terms of an incentive to do work, I think the guiding principles, I think are I think something that probably resonates with a lot of entrepreneurs. As the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce, a lot of our members are entrepreneurs themselves that definitely embody hard work and also at the same time the vision and we embrace the possibilities of a greater future, and I think and doing that by hard work and definitely not through something that we take for granted. So, however, having said that, in today's political world, in an election, if one side says universal basic income, how wouldn't it be difficult for you to counter something like that? How would the Conservative Party, if somebody said, and I don't know if anybody's going to say this, but if somebody did say that universal basic income is a right of every Canadian, how would a Conservative Party led by Erin O'Toole, counter that? I mean, we as the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, are probably wanting to hear, if that happened, how would we change the way we run our businesses, and what would you think of something? You obviously have thought this through, because it could be something that somebody could pull out of the hat, but we'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Sure. Let's use an example of some of your members from the ICCC. Mm-hmm. Ask how many of them came here to go on a UBI? How many people moved around the world, in some cases learned or improved a new language, brought potential, uncertainties into their future, especially if they had a young family? They came here for opportunity. And I've said, whether it's someone that gets up at 5 a.m. to get in their transport truck in Brampton, to open their small business in Surrey, to go to their job in a forestry mill in Northern Ontario, there's nobility in that, Vijay. And what I want to do is make sure that we can get people to work in all sectors of the economy, in all regions of the country, and remove any barriers that are there. As you said, provide perhaps some incentives to kickstart the economy back in action. Because the economy, the biggest measure I look at is not how fast our GDP is growing. It's whether mom or dad has a job, if they can work to provide their family. Because not only is that important for the well-being of the family, it's part of the purpose that is part of your life. I've met another Indo-Canadian business leader I've gotten to know, came with very little, now employs many people, and has served on a large hospital board for well over a decade, raising money. He didn't come here for a government program. He came here for opportunity. So what Conservatives have said throughout this crisis, we were approving programs like the CERB, like the wage subsidy, like CEBA, like everything. Even when we told the Liberals, these programs are partially broken, we're gonna vote for them to get the money out the door to help people in a crisis, but then we're gonna fix them. We fixed the wage subsidy. I spoke to several ministers personally to move it from 10 to 75%, because I worked in the private sector. I said, no one's gonna save a job for 10%. We improved the rent assistance program. That took us longer, took us many months to get the Liberals to finally recognize that many tenants were being left out of their original program. And we voted with them on so many things to help people. But we need smart government. And smart government doesn't come from just saying who can spend the most. It's who can give Canadians the opportunity to succeed and to be fulfilled and to provide that opportunity to their children and grandchildren. So I think you're going to see all of the parties on the left, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Singh, the Bloc, the Green Party, all fighting over who can spend your kids' money faster. Because we're talking debt levels now, Vijay. My 9-year-old is somewhere here in the house. Mr. Trudeau's spending away his future. Is that what people want? Or do they want the opportunity to get back to work and to remove any barriers, if there are any barriers for people accessing work, or if there's some groups hit harder, racialized Canadians, women, young people? We're going to tear down those barriers, because we're the party about opportunity. And that will be our argument. I think Canadians know that the UBI is not only unaffordable, it's not actually helpful for the well-being of our society. It runs contrary to kind of the things that have helped build Canada into the great country it is. And the BC government just studied it, and it's a NDP government. And their study said the UBI doesn't help people, and it strains the government coffers. So I think we just have to get people working.
Absolutely. I run a small, venture capital company. So we've invested in a PPE manufacturing company in Scarborough, and our biggest problem was getting people to come to work, because the CERB is kind of, somebody said I can sit at home and kind of make the same amount of money. So what's the incentive to wake up in the morning and go to work? So I think there's a little bit of fine tuning that definitely has to be put into, because you need to have an incentive to go to work. Even if there was an UBI, this is just, me and some people at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, we were putting our heads together, and it probably has to keep people from dying of hunger or freezing in the cold. But there has to be some kind of, so that universal has to be really basic. The universal basic income cannot be high in that it provides a disincentive to work. So I think somewhere there's a fine tuning that needs to be done, even if something were to go. And if you were going to be in government, we're going to volunteer to try to help you, fine tune that. So we have a lot of smart people at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to volunteer some of our folks to try to help you fine tune that. So having said that, I think one big constituency at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce is business. And the problem is businesses don't vote. Unfortunately, businesses don't vote. It's only people that vote. And so, that is one of the big reasons why residential property taxes in Toronto are 1/3 property taxes on businesses. So how would a conservative government look at businesses? And then give you another example. People are we're talking about, the taxes on your capital gains exemption on your principal residence. Now, these are issues where these came in because there is an exemption on businesses capital gains. It's a one-time exemption, and if you buy and sell businesses as you buy and sell homes, there doesn't seem to be an incentive for you to do that. However, if you were to think long-term, is people who run businesses and start and sell businesses are actually creating jobs. So shouldn't they be incentivized more and not have a cap on their capital gains versus somebody that buys a passive investment like a house, has an unlimited capital gains exemption on principal residence for life? It's unlimited. So what would be your thoughts on something like that? Where as the president of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, I would say you should be looking at an unlimited business exemption on capital gains as well. Why not?
Well, let me say two things, Vijay, right off the top. As a conservative, I believe in lower taxes, and we want to see effective, fair government, but not big bureaucracy, effective government, fair government. And we want to keep taxes low on individuals, on small businesses, on corporations. And any extra tax actually is a drag on investment and job creation in the country, including Mr. Trudeau's increases to taxes on small businesses, to payroll taxes. All of these things maybe only holds back a few jobs here and there, but where you multiply that across the country, it hurts employment. So we are generally the lower tax party. But the second principle I'll say is I support Canada's progressive tax system, meaning we have brackets, as you know, that go up. I think Mr. Trudeau has taken advantage of that, and he often targets people, the 1%, and trying to suggest that small business owners were tax cheats. All of that is very divisive, and we didn't see that in Canada because of our progressive tax system until Mr. Trudeau and their divisive language. In fact, Mr. Trudeau's trying to constantly import some of the US style of politics, not us. They're the ones having US political experts come to their convention this weekend, not us. So we like to see that fairness, and we think, especially at the higher margins, people should not be avoiding or evading taxes. They should be paying their fair share for the great country that we all have. But we need to encourage investment and risk taking. As I said, those entrepreneurs, many of your members that have had tremendous success, how do we make sure that that's encouraged? Because behind every successful business and transaction, as you said, there are multiple jobs. Even the transactions, as you know, the accountants, the consultants, the lawyers, I used to do some of that work, all are part of our financial sphere. So we need companies investing, expanding, creating intellectual property in Canada. So we're looking at a series of policies on that, Vijay. What we will fight hard against is Mr. Trudeau's examination of all these tax increases. They've had the CMHC studying taxing the capital gains on primary residence. That's how most people save for retirement, is through their home. They're talking about having higher tax brackets, raising the GST, and they will have to do this if they don't get spending under control. That's why our recovery plan, the fifth pillar, is the Conservatives will get people working, we'll get 1 million jobs, we'll right the ship, and then fairly over the course of a decade, we will get spending back under control so that we're not mortgaging our children's and grandchildren's future. Because the spending Mr. Trudeau is committing to without a plan, if interest rates go up in a few years, Mr. Trudeau's overspending puts healthcare at risk. It puts old age security for our parents at risk. That's a program run out of government funding. And if interest rates return to even normal historic levels, Mr. Trudeau is creating the conditions for a debt crisis, and we won't let him mortgage our children's future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Erin O'Toole. It is I think music to our ears to hear that. I think a lot of people in the audience would definitely think, and I think you're talking, you're saying that this is something that the Conservatives have already done. So it's not something that you're saying is just you're pulling out of thin air. It can be done, but obviously you need a little bit of a runway. It's something that would take time as well. So with that, out of the way, I think there's one other issue that we wanted to touch on, which is housing prices. It seems like this is on a tear, especially you're a GTA, MP in the GTA, and I think across Canada. I saw a video recently which talked about, housing prices across different, leading economies of the world. Canadian housing prices are the highest by far in terms of growth. We're like, I think double the second fastest growing, housing price, which is I think the UK. So what do you think? Is this something that the government, again, from a conservative principles, free market, at what point is free market not free market? Where do you draw a line, and where does government have to intervene at all? And where does competing priorities of housing affordability come in? And how would the government look at some things like this? Because affordability in a city like Toronto is a big issue. And I run a software company myself, and I see people that seem to be moving out of the city, and I ask them, why are you going so far away? They say, I cannot buy a home here, or I cannot afford rents in Toronto. So what would be a conservative government by Erin O'Toole look like on these issues?
Well, thanks, Vijay. The housing market in Canada was already very, very, moving swiftly and almost expanding at a rate that was defying logic before COVID. And now we've seen, because of people not spending in other areas, that they're putting money into properties. And so some of the bidding wars we're seeing in the GTA, including in my region in Durham, and in the lower mainland of British Columbia, it's even crazier. So there's a few things that can be done. And we have a housing shadow minister. And he's a young MP from the lower mainland of British Columbia. So we're putting together a number of policies. Clearly, supply is a key part of it. And that is something the Ford government in Ontario is looking at, as well as Oregon and other governments across the country. That's more provincial and municipal, but that's got to be a key part of it. And we're committed to working on that as well. The federal government, though, does do everything from the mortgage stress test rules for CMHC and setting the terms and even the basic fundamentals of a mortgage contract. That's a federally guided financial rule. And so we're looking at how can that play a part of it? How can first-time home buyers take advantage of devices like RSPs and things like that right now millennials, they're accumulating student debt. They don't have RSPs, but their parents might. So can we look at that? Because we know the statistics show many of these house races and bid ups, people are getting assistance from family. How can we make sure that that's fair? And how can we also make sure that we don't expose the overall market to risk, which is another reason why the fiscal condition of the country is important, because the well-being, if we have high unemployment and we have interest rate increases, not only will the government have trouble keeping up with its debt requirements, citizens will on mortgage rates, especially if they're variable. So we're looking at a range of programs, Vijay. I don't think anyone would be sincere if they said one policy is going to fix the affordability crisis in the GTA. It's going to be a series of things. It's also going to be people recognizing that for the next little while, until we vaccinate, until we get the economy back to normal, there's going to be, I think, almost a euphoric buying frenzy that people will have to be very careful with, because we could see a swift reduction. And some people, as I said, if interest rates are higher in a few years, could be in a very challenging situation.
Absolutely. It's the same thing that holds good for the country, holds good for individual mortgagees as well. So absolutely, I think very wise words there from Erin O'Toole. I've got a few more questions. I think we've got maybe another 10 minutes to go. So we'll take one of them, maybe a little bit of a hot potato, a question here, but I'll go for it. The Conservative government and oil, the Conservative government and climate change. So what is a Conservative government under Erin O'Toole going to look like on these issues? I mean, Canada, all said and done, we've not really pivoted, out of oil. Oil is definitely fundamental to our economy. We can see that anybody that is a disbeliever that says the Canadian economy is not connected to oil, look at oil prices as they go up. The Canadian dollar hardens. So it is a no-brainer. It is. We are connected to oil. I mean, so that is one thing. However, the future is green. We've got all of that, I think, statistics to prove that. Now, when is that going to come in? Are we going to pivot? We have countries like Norway that have pivoted very well. They used to be an oil-driven economy. They've done very well with their sovereign fund, the largest sovereign fund in the world, and then they did that by collecting less money than we did in Alberta. So there have been countries that did this very well. So what would we do? Like on oil, on clean energy, on things like carbon taxes, where does the Conservative government under Erin O'Toole look like? What would be your driving principles on these issues?
Well, a government led by me, Vijay, will be serious, focused on our economic recovery, which includes supporting our energy sector and the hundreds of thousands of Canadians connected to it, but also taking climate change very seriously. Mr. Trudeau has failed on all of his climate targets in his time as Prime Minister. He talks a great game. Mr. Trudeau is very good at the photo op and the hashtag on Twitter. You know where he's not good? Following up on anything. We're in 45th place or 50th place in vaccines. We're behind the whole world in rapid tests and everything else. There's no leadership from the Prime Minister. And just taxing people is not an emission reduction plan. So Vijay, I think people will be pleasantly surprised to see that the Conservative Party, under my leadership, will have a serious approach to reducing emissions, while also making sure after COVID-19 that people get to work in all sectors of the country, in all regions. I say with $500 billion that Mr. Trudeau's put on our debt in the last 5 years, if we don't have every cylinder in our engine, economic engine firing, we're not going to have the prosperous country that we all depend on. And so we need to make sure that we take climate change seriously, but also recognize that the world will be using energy, including hydrocarbons, oil and gas, for the next century. Likely over time in a diminished fashion. But should they be using...
Mr. O'Toole, you went on mute, sorry.
Oh, I think it accidentally muted.
Sorry.
Should that energy come from dictatorships like Venezuela or Russia, or should they come from countries that are getting their emissions down, that are engaging with Indigenous Canadians in the supply chains and in the employment, that have high rule of law? Should India, our democratic friend and partner, be buying resources from a Canadian source or from Russia or China or Venezuela? I think we should have the free and democratic world do more trade and more alignment on a rules-based system on emission reduction and everything else. And I think if Canada takes this seriously, we can make sure that over the next couple of generations, we still have prosperity, but we're also meeting our commitments to get emissions down. That is my commitment. It is not an either or situation. Mr. Trudeau, who has never worked in the private sector, who has never had to really make a paycheck or live to have a plan, it was all laid out for him, doesn't realize you cannot turn a switch and change our economy because a few people around him say you have to do that. You have to do this in a way that's fair, that recognizes that a lot of our industry in Western Canada is getting their emissions down on energy production now. How can we accelerate that? So I think Canada can continue to be a strong player in natural resources while getting our emissions down. We're going to have a plan out before the election, Vijay, on emission reduction, on climate change, on the environment. And I think people will see the Conservatives have a serious plan and we'll get people working.
Fantastic. I think that's kind of great to hear, and I think I think we're a lot of us in the audience, me here are saying, yes, we need to. It's almost like driving a hybrid car. You got the engine and you got the plug-in stuff as well. So I think and at some point obviously you've got to get everything else going as well. But I think that's especially given the fact that we've got so much legacy investments in hydrocarbons, I think something that we should definitely look at. Now, with a little more time left, another hot potato issue, vaccination. You've touched upon it a little bit. What could we have done differently? Now we had Minister Anand here. She gave her side of the story a couple of weeks back, and they seem to have on paper, and I kind of asked her the question on paper, if all of the vaccines that we actually ordered came in, we would have, I think, 10 vaccines per head. We would have so many more vaccines, per head, that it would be. But the big problem is it doesn't seem like all of them came in. So we did make the contracts. We actually I'm an engineer. So this is where we say, we used a big factor of safety. We ordered 10 times more, right? Than what we needed, but it hasn't actually come in. So what would we have done differently? People around say that, we could have gone manufactured, but we never really had the manufacturing capability. So, some of that might be, 2020 hindsight, but what do you think is real in real terms? And secondly, and this is a question, since this is not really done as yet, and potentially will only get done by September, what can Erin O'Toole, as the leader of the opposition, do to push the government to get this done? So 2 questions there. What would you have done differently? And what can you do still for us, the audience, to push to get something done?
Well, a lot there, and I'm happy to talk about it because we've tried to ask Minister Anand questions and we get no answers. In fact, here's the biggest question. Why did they partner with a Chinese company, CanSino, and put all their eggs in a basket with China? They will not answer that question. If Minister Anand is so proud of her portfolio of vaccines, as she calls it, why won't she release the contracts as some other countries have done? It is covering up incompetence of the highest order. And it's disappointing because as a legal professor, I think I had higher expectations on the minister, to be honest with you, but the government failed. There's no other way of saying that. When you look at us at 50th place behind Azerbaijan, behind countries like Costa Rica and others, 100 years ago, Vijay, we discovered insulin and gave it to the world. We are a bioscience leader. And last spring, right around this time, actually, I was saying we needed domestic capacity in Canada for all aspects of the crisis, from PPE and masks to ventilators to vaccines. We did have vaccine manufacturing capacity here. The Liberal government has misled people on this point as well. We had capacity in Quebec, in the GTA, and in Vancouver, had we needed to. We had more capacity than the United Kingdom did a year ago, and they set as a goal to have domestic manufacturing capacity. So it was a failure of leadership. And the portfolio myth that she has described, Vijay, I think just shows how they're hoping Canadians aren't paying attention. I said 6 months ago, I don't want to have the most amount of vaccines in 2024. I want to have a steady supply as early in 2021 as possible so that we can reopen our economy and keep people safe as quickly as possible, like they're doing in the United States, like they're doing in the United Kingdom, like they're doing in several other countries that will not experience the third wave to the same level we will, because Mr. Trudeau did not secure a steady and consistent supply. So 10 times as many people or vaccines over 4 years. Sorry, that's not leadership. Nothing shows it better, Vijay, than they are taking vaccines from the Fund for Developing Countries, the COVAX Fund. Canada's never acted like that before. We've always given more to the developing world. So it's probably the biggest political leadership failure in the history of our country. And I take no joy in saying that, because it means more health challenges, more economic challenges. So domestic manufacturing capacity was what I argued for a year ago. It is going to be central. It's the fourth pillar of my recovery plan, making sure we have capacity. And here, I'm a lawyer that was working on these things in the private sector, more experienced than the entire Trudeau cabinet. And in the military, we were prepared to plan and to have readiness. And in fact, in many ways, some of the Conservative suggestions have been several months ahead of where the government is. And what have we done in the short term, Vijay? A couple of months ago, we asked the government to call Prime Minister Modi with respect to, is there sufficient excess supply in India with one of the largest pharmaceutical production capacities in terms of volume quickly? After we pushed, my shadow minister, Michelle Rempel-Garner, brought it up at committee. A week later, Mr. Trudeau made the phone call. You know, the relationship since his state visit has been a very bad one with India. There's been tariffs. There's been a declining relationship. I know I don't have to tell that to you because your members have felt it. Our pressure made the Prime Minister make the call, and I said I was very thankful he did. So when the Prime Minister has tried to secure extra sources at our encouragement, I've thanked him for doing it, because I'll always put the health and well-being of our citizens first.
Thank you very much, Erin. On that note, the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, the ICCC, was the first Indo-Canadian organization to welcome that meeting, and we wholeheartedly look at improving relations. If anything, we think this could be the start of a new era, and vaccine diplomacy can lead to increased trade. And increased trade could be the rising tide that can float all boats. So that is our mantra. And Erin O'Toole, the Honorable Erin O'Toole, thank you very, very much for making time for us today. We have a couple of announcements, but please stay for a few minutes, and we've got my colleague will also join in and have a few things to say. But before that, if we can just go through our 10 days, 10 states event once more. I promised a little more details. So it's called ICCC Connect. Connect is connecting at the next level 2021. 10 days, 10 states, 10x opportunities. So how can you participate? Next. So we have sponsorship opportunities. So this is the details. Here are the states we're going to: Andhra Pradesh, Goa, Gujarat, Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Punjab, Rajasthan, UP. And here are the sectors: technology and startups, auto and e-mobility, food and agriculture, healthcare, pharma, medical devices, travel and tourism, and education. Moving on. So here are the sponsorship opportunities. Those of you in the audience that might want to join as the platinum title sponsor, gold sponsor, sector sponsor, each of the sectors that I talked about, or a state sponsor, get to us with with your and we will send you more information. Send us your details. And then delegates, anybody in Canada wanting to look at expanding into India, the fastest growing large economy in the world, where English is the lingua franca, people speak English. I did not learn my English when I came to Canada. I already spoke English in India. And this is something that we definitely want you guys to participate. And those of you who are here and looking at India as a market, please do join us on the delegation. With that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Virender Rathi. Virenderji, over to you.
Thank you, Vijay. Friends, I am Virender Rathi. I am the President and Vice President and Director of Legal Affairs and Government Relations at the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Now it is time to acknowledge all our collaborators for this afternoon extremely interesting and relevant webinar with Honorable Erin O'Toole, Canada Leader of Opposition and the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I am sure everyone will agree that today's session was interesting and relevant and will go a long way in helping us understand the policy direction that Honorable O'Toole is talking on a number of issues. On behalf of our chamber, I express our sincere gratitude to him for agreeing to devote his time to participate in our webinar. Our thanks also to his team members for helping us organize the webinar. We acknowledge the support we receive every week from Tenacia, our technology partner, who have been helping ICCC mount these webinars since April 2020. Special acknowledgements to our gold sponsor, Turkish Airlines, and our sector sponsor, SBI Canada Bank, ICICI Bank Canada, Seneca College, Rakesh Vijay and Raymond James, Teles Business, and GT20. Gratitude also to our media partners, Weekly Voice and PTC Punjabi Canada. Last but not the least, a huge round of applause to our audience. It is your continued support that gives us the necessary encouragement to organize these weekly webinars. Stay tuned in for the next session on Thursday, April 15. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the Honorable Erin O'Toole, and have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Virender. Thank you.